Harbor Federal Bank was located at the corner of Main and 5th Streets. The bank was a very reputable institution and had many distinguished clients. The morning sun shone into the bank. Evelyn Harper had been banking there for 42 years. That was longer than most of the current staff had been alive. Her late husband Thomas had worked at Patterson Mill for 30 years before dying of a heart attack 12 years ago. Since then, Evelyn had come to Harbor Federal on the first Tuesday of every month to cash her husband's retirement check. This was a routine she knew by heart. Arrive at 10 a.m. after the morning rush, show her check and ID to any available teller, collect her money, and go home. Simple, ordinary, a safe transaction. Until that final morning, Evelyn was waiting in line on a bright October Tuesday, the autumn sun shining into the bank. Her arthritic fingers held the retirement check carefully, $2,847, the same amount for the past 12 years. The paper trembled slightly in her hand. Behind her in line, a young man in civilian clothes waited patiently. Isaiah Cole looked like an ordinary person to casual observers. Isaiah was a retired Navy SEAL, 28 years old, who had been to places most Americans couldn't even pronounce during his 10 years of service. 6 months ago, he had left active duty after a mission he still couldn't talk about, even to himself. Now he was traveling from town to town, trying to find a purpose in the civilian world, which felt both too loud and too quiet. He was definitely trying to live a quiet life. He had chosen Harbor Springs at random, a small town in the Midwest with no military connections, no memories that would cause nightmares. He was waiting in line to open a simple checking account. His plan was to stay a few weeks, maybe find a temporary job and move on without putting down roots. He had no intention of getting involved in other people's problems. When Evelyn reached the teller window, Isaiah recorded the transaction with the passive awareness honed by the SEALs. The teller was young, in her early 20s with blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun. The name tag read Lydia Barnes. "How can I help you?" Lydia asked. "Good morning," Evelyn said in a warm voice, placing her check and driver's license on the counter. "I'd like to cash this check, please," she said. Lydia took Evelyn's ID with exaggerated care and held it at arm's length as if it might be contaminated. Her eyes darted suspiciously between the photo and Evelyn's face. She acted as if Evelyn didn't deserve that check. Lydia paused. "Could you please verify your address again?" she asked. Evelyn remained patient, but Isaiah noticed her shoulders tense slightly. "It's been the same for 42 years, dear. 1247 Maple Street," she replied. Evelyn knew this was intentional. "And you're saying this check is from your husband's pension?" Lydia asked another question. "Yes," Evelyn replied, her voice steady despite her slightly trembling hands. Lydia's voice grew louder. "It's just the amount it seems unusual." Her eyes drifted to the glass-enclosed office behind the tellers. "One moment, please." The atmosphere in the bank shifted slightly. The other customers waiting in line began to stir. Some were annoyed by the delay, while others watched with uncomfortable interest. Isaiah remained still, but he was aware of things. He had been in hostile enough situations and could recognize the signs. Lydia's body language shifting from tense indifference to ostentatious suspicion, the glances exchanged among the staff, the sudden tension unrelated to routine banking transactions. He knew what it all meant. Grant Holland emerged from his office with the determined stride of someone waiting for a signal. He was in his mid-40s, wearing an expensive shirt, his arms bent to show off his expensive watch, walking with authority. He approached Lydia, and they spoke in whispers. However, parts of the conversation could be heard. Suspicious activity. Verify the source. Possible fraud. These were not normal conversations. The last word echoed in the suddenly silent bank. Evelyn tensed up but tried to stay calm. "Mr. Holland, I've been doing business with this bank for over 40 years. You can check your records. This is a routine transaction," she said. Holland's smile was condescending. "Ma'am, we have procedures to follow. Perhaps you are confused about the source of this check," he said. He was clearly accusing Evelyn, but he would realize much later that he had made a big mistake. "I'm not confused," Evelyn said firmly. "I want to speak to the branch manager." "The manager is unavailable," Holland replied, "and given the circumstances, I think we need to involve other officials to resolve this matter," he said. Isaiah observed Holland's body language, the slight smirk, the way he positioned himself to tower over Evelyn's smaller frame, the barely concealed satisfaction, the feigned concern. This wasn't about following procedures. This was about power. Isaiah understood exactly what the manager was trying to do. Everyone else in the bank was now watching what was happening. Lydia's demeanor had completely changed. She had pulled back from the window, crossed her arms, and was looking everywhere except at Evelyn. "You'll have to wait here," she said. Evelyn knew something was wrong. "I didn't do anything wrong," Evelyn said. She took her heart medication out of her bag. Isaiah noticed that the security guard by the door had changed his stance, placing one hand on his hip. There was extra tension in the bank. Everyone could feel it clearly. Holland took out his phone and walked away. His voice could be heard. Yes, there's a problem at Harbor Federal. Possible fraud. An elderly woman is getting excited. Evelyn stood motionless in front of the counter, her husband's retirement check between her and Lydia. My husband worked at the factory for 30 years, said Evelyn. This is his retirement check. I've been cashing it here every month since he died. Ma'am, Holland said, if you continue to cause trouble, we'll have other problems, he threatened vaguely. Just then, a police car passing in front of the bank stopped in front of it. The bank doors opened. 2 uniformed officers entered. Evelyn Harper, called the tall one, resting his hand casually on his belt. His badge read, R. Denton. The atmosphere in the bank turned tense and dangerous. The phones continued to ring. The security guard approached. Lydia Barnes stood behind her counter with a slight smile on her lips. Everyone could see that her ego was satisfied. Isaiah Cole remained completely still. Thanks to his SEAL training, he was calculating possible scenarios. He noted the officers' name tags, their body language, how they positioned themselves to control the area. They were all familiar movements. Most importantly, he noted Officer Denton's approach to Evelyn. Meanwhile, Evelyn's hand was not shaking. There was something that would definitely not let her be intimidated. Officer Denton approached with a practiced air, his partner Kruger following a step behind him. Denton's face showed a barely concealed satisfaction. Step away from the counter, ma'am, Denton ordered. He didn't ask the bank employees about the situation. He didn't examine the check on the counter or Evelyn's ID. For Denton, the situation was already clear. Officer, if I may explain, Evelyn began, her voice calm despite the fear Isaiah could see in her slightly widened eyes. I said step away. Denton's voice hardened. He moved closer, deliberately invading her personal space. As Evelyn hesitantly tried to gather her things from the counter, Officer Kruger grabbed her arm. His fingers dug into her flesh as he pulled her sideways, away from the window. The sudden movement caused Evelyn's bag to fall from the counter. When the bag hit the floor, everything inside scattered. My medication, she cried as she tried to bend down to retrieve it. Kruger pulled her arm even higher behind her back. Ah! The pain in her scream caused several customers to gasp audibly. Everyone was watching this drama unfold. More phones came out, cameras began recording the incident. Isaiah's hands tensed at his sides. His SEAL training screamed at him to intervene, but years of discipline kept him in place. He needed to see how this played out, to document everything before acting. He needed proof. Ma'am, you are under arrest on suspicion of bank fraud, Denton announced loudly, clearly acting for the phones recording them. You have the right, he continued, but Evelyn interrupted. This is ridiculous. Her voice now stronger despite Kruger's tight grip. This check is legitimate. I've been cashing it here every month for 12 years. Anyone can confirm that. Things were getting messy. Are you resisting, he said. Denton approached, his hand going for the handcuffs. Because that will only make this worse. I'm not resisting anything, Evelyn said. I'm a 70-year-old woman trying to cash my late husband's retirement check. I haven't done anything wrong. Evelyn's refusal to be intimidated tightened Denton's jaw. Turn around. Hands behind your back, he ordered. Evelyn's age didn't matter to him. Evelyn slowly complied, her arthritic joints resisting the movement. When she turned, her eyes scanned the lobby. Grant Holland stood next to his office, arms crossed, wearing the same slight smile, while Lydia Barnes was now openly grinning. They were watching the pleasure of satisfying their own egos. Had anything like this ever happened to you before? After a moment, Evelyn's eyes settled on Isaiah. Isaiah saw everything in that look. He knew he had to help her. Isaiah shook his head very slightly and gave a nod of approval. The handcuffs were fastened around Evelyn's wrists with excessive force. These are too tight, she said quietly. They're cutting off my circulation, she said. No problem, Denton replied. Then, raising his voice for the audience, he said, Ma'am, you are under arrest for attempting to cash a counterfeit check. Do you understand? He made sure this was picked up by all the recording cameras around. The check isn't fake, Evelyn repeated. My husband was Thomas Harper. He worked at Patterson Mill for 30 years. This is his pension managed by the Mill Workers' Retirement Fund. Anyone with access to a computer can verify this in 2 minutes. She tried to explain, but Denton had no intention of being convinced. Denton's face flushed. Let's go, he snapped, grabbing Evelyn's arm and pushing her toward the door. Wait, Evelyn said. My medication. I need my heart medication. Kruger kicked the scattered pills with his boot. You should have thought about that before you tried to commit fraud, he continued to belittle her. As Denton dragged Evelyn toward the exit, she stumbled slightly. Denton pulled her up without slowing down. Walk, Grandma, he muttered. This isn't a welfare office. People like you don't belong in real banks. Isaiah watched and listened to everything happening. Isaiah's hands clenched into fists. Every instinct screamed at him to intervene, to knock Denton to the ground, to end this display of cruelty. But his training held him back. Any move now could be interpreted as an assault on a public official and make things worse. He absolutely had to act smart, but when Evelyn was pushed out the bank door into the bright October morning, Isaiah made a decision. He would follow her. He would document the incident. And whatever happened next, he would do everything in his power to make those responsible answer for it. His mind was made up. He moved toward the exit with the same practical ease he used on duty, but his eyes were recording everything. He knew almost everything that was happening by heart. Outside, Denton shoved Evelyn with unnecessary force toward the patrol car. Evelyn hit the vehicle and kept her balance by grabbing the hood with her cuffed hands. She almost fell to the ground. "Watch your head," said Kruger, pushing her into the back seat, deliberately allowing her head to hit the door frame. They were trying to hurt her on purpose. Isaiah stood on the sidewalk 30 meters away, pretending to check his messages while trying to record the incident with his phone. The patrol car pulled away from the curb, Evelyn visible through the rear window. Despite everything that had happened, she wasn't letting herself be crushed. Isaiah watched the car turn the corner and disappear, then return to the bank. Everyone at the bank carried on with their work as if nothing had happened. Isaiah took out his phone and made 3 calls in quick succession. First, he called a friend from the SEAL team who had started working as a private investigator. "Marcus, I want you to look into a few names for me. Evelyn Harper, officers Ray Denton and Kruger. I'll give you their badge numbers. And I want everything you can find on Harbor Federal Bank, especially any complaints or instances of discrimination," he said. Isaiah was now in motion. Second, he called a civil rights lawyer he had met at a veterans advocacy event. "Miss Chen, this is Isaiah Cole. I just witnessed an illegal arrest based on racial profiling. I have video." "Yes, I'll send it right away," he said. Third, he called his own bank to transfer money. "I'll need bail money, probably a few $1,000s. "Yes, today," he said. Then Isaiah returned to Harbor Federal Bank. From his office window he could see Grant Holland leaning back in his chair with a satisfied expression. Isaiah approached the new account desk with the same calm demeanor he had displayed all morning. "I'd like to open a checking account," he said. "Of course, sir. I'll get you an application form," said the clerk. While Isaiah filled out the paperwork, his mind was already 3 steps ahead. He completed the application and extended it across the desk with a polite smile. The clerk processed his information efficiently. "Welcome to Harbor Federal, Mr. Cole. Your temporary bank card will be ready shortly," he said. Isaiah nodded his thanks and accepted the card. He now had an account at the bank that had orchestrated Evelyn Harper's arrest. This meant he had the right to request records, file complaints, and demand accountability from within. He had come intending to stay in Harbor Springs for a few weeks before continuing on his way. However, his plans had changed. The Harbor Springs Police Department was 2 blocks away from the bank. Evelyn Harper was sitting in a holding cell. The cell was small, clean, and utterly degrading. A metal bench bolted to the wall, a toilet with no privacy, fluorescent lights that shone relentlessly overhead. She sat upright on the metal bench. Her bag, her medications, everything was scattered on the floor of the cell. She could hear voices at the end of the corridor. Police officers were laughing. To them she was just another case, another arrest, another problem dealt with and under control. Footsteps were approaching. Evelyn sat up even straighter. Officer Denton appeared outside the cell with another officer. Evelyn could tell how pleased he was with her. "Evelyn Harper," he said, "you will be tried for attempted bank fraud, resisting arrest, and disturbing the peace. Bail has been set at $5,000, Denton said. He seemed very pleased with this situation. "I didn't do any of these things," Evelyn said. "And you know it," she added. Denton's smile widened. "Ma'am, I know you tried to cash a suspicious check, that you became angry when questioned, and that you forced us to intervene. That's what my report says. That's what matters," he said. He was clearly explaining how he had arrested her unjustly. "What matters is the truth," Evelyn replied. "The truth," Denton said, leaning closer to the bars, "is what we say it is." "Do you really think they'll believe a woman like you over the law?" he asked mockingly. Evelyn looked him straight in the eye. "I think anyone with internet access could verify that check in 2 minutes. I think that bank's cameras recorded everything. And I think you made a very serious mistake today," she said. Everything was clear. Evelyn wasn't afraid. She was definitely going to fight for her rights. It wouldn't be long now. Denton's smile faded a little. "Is that a threat?" he asked. "It's a fact. Real threats don't need to be made. They just need time," Evelyn replied. The officer next to Denton cleared his throat uncomfortably. Denton, we probably," he tried to say. "Get back to work," Denton snapped at him. Then, turning to Evelyn, he sneered. "Enjoy your stay, Miss Harper. It might take a while to find someone to post your bail. People like you don't usually carry $5,000 on them." As he walked away, Evelyn was left alone again under the fluorescent lights. But Evelyn Harper had spent 70 years surviving. She closed her eyes and began to pray. Not for rescue, but for strength. Not for a miracle, but for justice. While Evelyn sat in that cell, preserving her dignity against institutional cruelty, Isaiah Cole sat in a cafe 3 blocks away, making his plan. His laptop was open on the small table next to his phone and a notebook in which he wrote down everything he saw in detail. Isaiah had already sent the video he recorded to civil rights lawyer Sarah Chen. Her response came immediately. "This case is actionable. Can you get witness statements?" she asked. He had contacted Marcus Reynolds, his SEAL buddy who had gone into private investigation. Marcus had already begun background research. Marcus's preliminary report was damning. Officer Ray Denton, 47 complaints in 8 years, all dismissed. The pattern suggests he targets elderly minorities. Officer Kruger, 23 complaints, similar pattern. Harbor Federal Bank, 15 discrimination complaints filed with the State Banking Commission in the last 5 years, all resolved internally with no evidence of wrongdoing. Grant Holland. His name appears in 8 of these complaints, the report stated. Isaiah took notes, compared the information, and realized that Evelyn's arrest was not an isolated incident. The phone rang. It was Marcus. "Tell me you found something," Isaiah answered. "Better than something." "I found everything," he said. Marcus's voice had the satisfaction of a hunter who had found his trail. "Evelyn Harper is exactly who she says she is. She was married to Thomas Harper for 41 years. Thomas died 12 years ago. Thomas worked at Patterson Mill for 30 years. I got his employment records. His pension is managed by the Mill Workers Retirement Fund, completely legal, and they've been paying exactly $2,847 every month since his death," he said. "So the check is real," Isaiah said. "It really is. More interestingly, I looked into public records related to similar incidents. In the last 3 years, Harbor Federal called the police on 17 elderly minority customers trying to cash legitimate checks. 17. All charges were eventually dropped, but after the victims spent time in jail, paid legal fees, and were publicly humiliated," Marcus said. Isaiah's hands tightened around his phone. "It's a pattern," he replied. "It's systematic discrimination carried out with the cooperation of law enforcement. And here's the key point. Officer Denton was the officer who intervened in 12 of those 17 incidents. Their favorite guy." "Exactly. The bank calls, Denton shows up, makes the arrest, writes reports justifying the arrest. The charges are quietly dropped a few weeks later, but the damage has already been done. The victims are too scared to fight back, too poor to hire a lawyer, and too afraid to file a complaint," Marcus said. "But this time they picked the wrong victim to intimidate," said Isaiah, "because this time a Navy SEAL happened to be watching," he said. Marcus paused. "What are you going to do here, Isaiah?" he asked. He was curious. Isaiah looked at his notes. "Names, dates, examples of abuse documented with military precision. I'm going to get justice for Evelyn Harper, and I'm going to make sure this never happens to anyone else," he replied. "Need any help?" Marcus asked. "Not yet, but keep investigating. I want to know who else is involved," he said. "Understood. Isaiah, be careful. Those who abuse their power don't give up easily," Marcus warned. Isaiah hung up and immediately dialed another number. Sarah Chen answered on the second ring. "Mr. Cole, I reviewed your video. This is clear evidence of racial profiling and excessive use of force. I'm prepared to file a federal civil rights complaint, but I need more," she replied. "There's more," Isaiah said, summarizing Marcus's findings. Chen's professional composure cracked a little. "This is bigger than I thought. This isn't just an unjust arrest, it's a conspiracy. I need to contact the FBI's Civil Rights Division," she said. "How long will it take for Ms. Harper to be released?" Isaiah asked. He didn't want her to stay there any longer. "The bail is $5,000. I can send someone to the jail to post bail within an hour. But Mr. Cole, she'll need protection. Those who orchestrate this kind of systematic abuse don't respond well to those who resist," he said. She clearly needed protection. "I'll make sure she's protected," Isaiah said. "Do you understand what you're getting into?" Chen asked. "I've fought worse enemies under worse conditions," Isaiah replied. "At least this time, I'm fighting for an American citizen whose rights are being violated in broad daylight on American soil," he added. "Then let's proceed. I'll file a federal complaint this afternoon. I'll arrange for Ms. Harper's release. And I'll begin coordinating with the FBI," he said. At 2 p.m. Isaiah returned to the station, this time entering through the front door. As Isaiah approached, the officer on duty looked up. "Can I help you?" he asked. "I'm here to post bail for Evelyn Harper," Isaiah said. The officer's expression changed slightly. $5,000, he said. Isaiah placed the bank check he had obtained from his bank an hour earlier on the counter. "I know," he said. The sergeant processed the payment with professional efficiency, but Isaiah could see the questions in his eyes. Why was this young black man posting bail for someone he probably didn't know? "The paperwork will be done in about 30 minutes, the sergeant said, handing him a receipt over the counter. "You can wait over there," he said. Isaiah sat down on a plastic chair in the waiting room, in a position where he could clearly see the corridor where Evelyn would eventually emerge. He began waiting for Evelyn with curious and anxious eyes. He took out his phone and checked his messages. Sarah Chen had sent an update. The federal complaint has been filed. FBI Special Agent Daniel Frost will contact you this evening. He specializes in corporate civil rights violations. Your documents will be very important. Everything was going exactly as Isaiah had hoped. Marcus had sent another report. I found more. According to Grant Holland's LinkedIn profile, he transferred to Harbor Federal from a branch in Tennessee 3 years ago. That branch was sued for discrimination. The settlement was signed, but Holland's name was mentioned in the complaint. The bank didn't fire him. They transferred him and promoted him. This practice is approved by upper management, it said. This was an even better development. With every passing second, Isaiah's hand was growing stronger. Isaiah took more notes to build the case with the same precision he once used when planning tactical operations. Every detail mattered. At 2:47 p.m., a door opened and Evelyn Harper walked out, accompanied by a female officer who seemed uncomfortable with her assignment. Evelyn walked with the same upright posture she had when she entered the bank that morning, but Isaiah could see the fatigue in her eyes and the protection she gave her right wrist, where the handcuffs had left deep marks. She stopped when she saw him, and a look of surprise appeared on her face. Isaiah stood up. "Miss Harper, I'm Isaiah Cole. I was at the bank this morning. I paid your bail," he said. Evelyn's eyes widened. "You? But why? You don't even know me," she stammered. Evelyn was in turmoil. "Because what happened to you was wrong, because I witnessed it, and because I can help fix it," Isaiah said. The female officer cleared her throat. "Ma'am, you are free to go. Your court date is November 15th. If you fail to appear in court," she continued, "I'll be there," Evelyn said. "I didn't do anything wrong, and I intend to prove it," she added. Isaiah, aware of the eyes watching them from various desks and doorways, guided Evelyn toward the exit. Let them watch. Let them wonder. Let them realize that this time their victim has an ally who knows how to fight back, he thought. Outside, the afternoon sun was beautiful. Evelyn stopped on the sidewalk and took a deep breath of the free air. "My medication," she said suddenly. "My bag. It's still at the bank," she said. "We'll get it," Isaiah reassured her. "But first, let me take you somewhere safe." "Do you have family nearby?" he asked. "My daughter lives in Chicago. My son is in the army overseas." "I live alone," she replied. Evelyn's voice trembled slightly. "I don't understand anything. I went to cash my check and suddenly I'm a criminal." "How did this happen?" she asked. "This happened because people in power abuse that power and have been getting away with it for years. But this will end. I promise you," Isaiah said. As he opened the passenger door for Evelyn beside the truck in the parking lot, Evelyn studied his face. "You were in the military. I can understand that," she said. "Navy SEALs. 10 years. And now you're helping an old woman you don't know. Why?" Evelyn asked. Isaiah thought of all the reasons he could give. "Because when I was on duty, I fought enemies who wanted to destroy the values America stands for. That wasn't what I risked my life to defend," he replied. Evelyn's eyes lit up. "Thank you, Mr. Cole," she said. "Isaiah, you don't need to thank me yet. We've only just begun," he replied. He took Evelyn to a small restaurant 3 blocks from her home. The restaurant was a public place, surrounded by windows on all sides, where conversations could be held safely. While Evelyn sipped her coffee, which she barely touched, Isaiah told her what he had discovered. He showed her all the information and documents he had. Evelyn listened quietly, her face showing shock, anger, and finally a kind of bitter understanding. "I thought I was the only one," she said. But nothing was as she had thought. "You didn't do anything wrong. This is their fault, every bit of it. Ms. Harper, what happened to you is part of a pattern. You're not the first, but if we fight this, you could be the last." A civil rights lawyer named Sarah Chen is filing a federal complaint. The FBI will investigate. But you need to be strong, give your statement, and not back down even if they try to intimidate you and dismiss the case, Isaiah said. He warned her about what could happen and motivated her. "They've already tried that," Evelyn said. "Officer Denton made it very clear that he just wanted me to disappear. He thought I'd be scared and wouldn't fight back." "Are you scared?" Isaiah asked. "I'm scared to death," Evelyn admitted. "I'm 70 years old. I live alone. I don't have money for a lawyer or protection but I'm also thinking about those 17 people," she said. She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. "Yes, I'm scared. But I'm also ready to fight." "What do we do now?" Evelyn asked. Isaiah sensed that something had changed. "Right now, we're documenting everything. We're gathering evidence. We're building a case so solid that even a corrupt system won't be able to ignore it. And while we do that, we're taking the necessary precautions to protect you," he said. The phone rang. A message from an unknown number. "This is Special Agent Daniel Frost from the FBI Civil Rights Division. Sarah Chen gave me your contact information. Can we meet tonight? I reviewed your video. This situation requires urgent federal investigation." Isaiah showed the message to Evelyn. "The FBI wants to talk to us. Are you ready for this?" he asked. Things were getting more serious. This had to happen. Everyone who turned a blind eye to this had to pay the price. Evelyn put her coffee cup on the table. Mr. Cole, Isaiah, I cashed the same check at the same bank for 12 years. Today they treated me like a criminal because they thought I was vulnerable. They thought I was alone, she said. Evelyn looked Isaiah in the eye with determination. They were wrong. Let's show them how wrong they were, she said. Evelyn was now even more courageous. Special Agent Daniel Frost arrived at the restaurant at exactly 6 p.m. He was in his early 40s, fair-skinned, and had the professional demeanor of someone who had served in federal law enforcement for years. Frost sat down at the table opposite Isaiah and Evelyn. Miss Harper, I'm sorry for what happened to you. What I saw in Mr. Cole's video was horrific. I want you to know that the FBI takes civil rights violations very seriously, he said. Thank you, Agent Frost, said Evelyn. The marks from the handcuffs on her wrist were clearly visible. When Frost noticed this, his face hardened. Did you seek medical attention for these injuries? He asked. I asked for my heart medication in jail. They told me it was evidence and couldn't be used, Evelyn replied. This is a violation of your rights as a detainee, Frost said, taking notes. We'll add this to the complaint. Mr. Cole, I reviewed the video you provided. It's a very heavy video, clear evidence of excessive force, racial profiling, and denial of the right to a fair trial, but I need more context. Tell me everything you observed, he said. He wanted to know the full story in detail. Over the next hour, Isaiah carefully recounted every detail. Frost now knew all the details. Evelyn added her perspective. She had worked at Harbor Federal for 42 years without incident, cashing her late husband's pension check regularly every month, and how the sudden change in treatment had first stunned her, then humiliated her. Frost took meticulous notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions that revealed his experience with civil rights cases. This isn't an isolated abuse. It's systematic. Based on Mr. Cole's investigators' preliminary findings, I began examining federal records. Over the past 5 years, Harbor Federal Bank has been flagged 17 times for suspicious activity reports concerning elderly minority customers attempting to cash legitimate checks. All 17 cases resulted in police intervention. All 17 cases resulted in arrests, he said. In fact, everything was completely out in the open, and all charges were eventually dropped, Isaiah added. But only after the victims had spent time in jail, paid legal fees, and were too intimidated to file civil complaints. Exactly. It's a model designed to terrorize and exclude. But what makes this a federal conspiracy rather than local abuse is this. The bank and the police department signed a formal public-private partnership agreement to prevent fraud. This agreement was signed 3 years ago by Police Chief Robert Warren and Harbor Federal's regional manager, he said. He showed them the document. This partnership gives the bank the right to go directly to the police without requiring an investigation in cases of suspected fraud, and it provides the police with legal protection for arrests based solely on the suspicions of bank employees. It's essentially a system designed to allow discrimination under the guise of crime prevention, he said. Both Evelyn and Isaiah were shocked by what they heard from Frost. Evelyn stared at the document. They've created a legal framework for harassment, she said. It was truly unbelievable. Exactly. And Officer Denton is the first responder to 90% of these calls. He's not just a bad cop, he's the enforcement arm of a discriminatory system, Frost said. Isaiah leaned forward. What's our next step, he asked. We're going to prepare a strong federal case. I'm launching a full civil rights investigation against Harbor Federal Bank, the police department, and everyone involved in this conspiracy, Frost said, looking at Evelyn. Ms. Harper, I want you to file a formal complaint with the FBI. Your testimony, combined with the video evidence and the pattern we've uncovered, will be crucial. Whatever you need, Evelyn said resolutely. She just wanted those officers to face consequences. I must warn you, resisting will make you a target. Those benefiting from this system won't surrender it quietly. They'll try to discredit you, intimidate you, maybe worse, he cautioned. I was already a target, Evelyn replied. Frost smiled slightly. Then let's fight. I'll need detailed statements from both of you. I'll need access to Mr. Cole's researchers' findings. And I'll need to identify other victims willing to testify, Frost said. I can help with that, said Isaiah. If there are 17 documented incidents, that means there are 17 potential witnesses who could testify to this pattern. As Frost prepared the official documents for Evelyn to sign, the restaurant door opened. Isaiah's awareness instantly sharpened, a seal's instinct for threats. Grant Holland entered with a man dressed in an expensive suit, who exuded an authority suggesting a legal background. They immediately spotted Evelyn and walked purposefully toward her table. Ms. Harper, Holland said, his voice tinged with feigned concern. I'm so glad to see you're all right. This was all a terrible misunderstanding. Isaiah moved slightly, placing himself between Evelyn and the approaching men. Frost remained seated but placed his hand on the badge visible on his belt. The man in the suit handed Evelyn a business card. Ms. Harper, I'm Gregory Marsh, representing Harbor Federal Bank. We'd like to discuss resolving this unfortunate incident. Evelyn had no intention of taking the card. The only unfortunate incident was my arrest for trying to cash a legitimate check. Yes, well, Marsh's smile was practiced, professional, and empty. Sometimes protocols cause confusion. The bank apologizes for the inconvenience and would like to offer you compensation for the trouble you've experienced. We're prepared to resolve this matter quickly and quietly, say, for $25,000. The figure hung in the air. For many people, especially elderly people living on a fixed income, $25,000 was a life-changing amount. It was enough to make the problems go away. It was enough to buy silence. Evelyn's expression did not change. Mr. Marsh, I don't want your money. I want a meaningful apology. I want policy changes to ensure this never happens to anyone else. And I want everyone involved in what happened to me to be held accountable. Marsh's professional demeanor cracked a little. Mr. Harper, be reasonable. You were detained for a few hours. You suffered no real harm. $25,000 is a generous compensation for such a minor inconvenience. Minor? Evelyn's voice rose, drawing the attention of other customers. I was handcuffed, denied my medication, humiliated in front of everyone, and thrown into a cell. You call that a minor inconvenience? Miss Harper? No. Evelyn stood up and forced Marsh and Holland to step back. The afternoon sun streaming through the window illuminated her from behind, making her small frame appear larger. What happened to me wasn't a minor inconvenience. It was deliberate, it was cruel, and I want the whole world to know it. Frost also stood up, his FBI badge now clearly visible. Gentlemen, I am Special Agent Daniel Frost, FBI Civil Rights Division. This conversation ends here. All future communication with Miss Harper or Mr. Cole must be conducted through their attorney, Sarah Chen. Marsh's eyes narrowed. The FBI? Isn't that a bit excessive for a simple bank dispute? Systematically targeting elderly minority customers, fabricating false fraud claims, and collaborating with law enforcement to arrest them on baseless charges goes far beyond a simple bank dispute, Frost replied coolly. This is a conspiracy to strip citizens of their civil rights. This is a federal crime. Holland's face flushed. You can't prove it. Actually, we can prove it. Video evidence, pattern documents, 17 similar incidents. This public-private partnership agreement that facilitates discrimination. We have quite a lot of evidence, Mr. Holland. Marsh grabbed Holland's arm and pulled him back. We're leaving. But Ms. Harper, you should know that rejecting this agreement means facing a long legal battle. The criminal case against you is still ongoing. You may want to reconsider. The criminal case will be dismissed, Frost said flatly. And with the dismissal of the case, Ms. Harper, I will file a federal civil rights complaint against your bank, Officer Denton, and everyone involved in this conspiracy. So yes, it will be a long legal battle, but you won't like the outcome. After Marsh and Holland parted ways, Holland's angry gesture toward his Mercedes parked in the lot signaled their departure. Evelyn sat back down, her hands trembling slightly. $25,000, she said quietly. They think that's the value of my honor. They think your silence is worth that much, Isaiah corrected. And the fact that they offered it so quickly shows how worried they are. Good, Evelyn said, her voice firming. They should be worried. The next morning dawned bright and clear, the autumn sun illuminating Harbor Springs with the kind of light that made everything sharp and distinct. Isaiah picked Evelyn up at 9 a.m. and drove her to the FBI field office 40 minutes away, where Evelyn would give her official statement. The federal building, made of glass and steel, stood imposing in the morning light, reflecting the weight of government authority. Inside, Frost had prepared a conference room where Evelyn could recount her story in detail, every moment documented and recorded for the federal investigation. As the morning sunlight streamed through the windows, Evelyn recounted what she had experienced over the past 3 hours. She recounted not only her arrest, but also her decades of trouble-free banking at Harbor Federal, the sudden change in treatment, Denton's deliberate cruelty, and the systematic abuse she had been subjected to. Frost asked careful questions, establishing a timeline, identifying patterns, and creating the kind of comprehensive record that would hold up in federal court. Isaiah spent his time coordinating with Marcus Reynolds, who was working through the night to identify other victims. So far, I've found 8 people willing to talk, Marcus reported by phone. I've spent the night coordinating with Marcus Reynolds to identify other victims. Using his time to coordinate with Marcus Reynolds, who was working through the night to identify other victims. So far, I've found 8 people willing to talk, Marcus reported by phone. Elderly Black and Hispanic customers, all arrested at Harbor Federal on fraud charges, but the charges were eventually dropped. They all experienced similar treatment: public humiliation, denial of medication or lodging requests, excessive force during arrest, and they were all either too scared or too poor to fight back. So far, Isaiah said. Set up meetings. Agent Frost will want to speak with all of them. By the afternoon, when Evelyn emerged from the deposition session tired but determined, the investigation had expanded far beyond what Harbor Federal or the police department could have anticipated. Frost led them outside, a stern look of satisfaction on his face. Miss Harper, your testimony was incredibly detailed and compelling. Combined with the other victims identified by Mr. Reynolds, we are building a case of systematic civil rights violations. What happens now? Evelyn asked. Now I will interview the other victims. I will subpoena the records from the bank and the police department. I will document this situation in such detail that no judge or jury can dismiss it. Frost stopped at the building's entrance. The afternoon sun cast sharp shadows. But I must warn you both, things will get tougher from here on out. Once they realize we won't back down, they'll get even tougher. Intimidation, harassment, attempts to damage your reputation. Stay alert, stay safe. As Isaiah drove Evelyn home in the bright afternoon, Evelyn was quiet, looking out the window at the ordinary streets of Harbor Springs, coffee shops, grocery stores, and people going about their lives, unaware of the battle for justice being waged in their city. Are you tired? Isaiah asked. Angry, Evelyn replied. As I recount what happened, listening to my own words, I can't help but think of those other 17 people, how they got through this process alone, how the system relied on their silence. They're not alone anymore, neither are you. Isaiah pulled up in front of Evelyn's house. It was a small, well-kept house on Maple Street, where she had lived for 42 years. The afternoon sun bathed the front yard in warm light, illuminating the autumn flowers. As Evelyn gathered her bag, Isaiah scanned the street with practiced attention. Everything seemed normal. Neighbors working in their gardens, children playing on distant lawns, and traffic flowed at a normal pace through the residential area. But his SEAL training made him cautious. Mrs. Harper, I'd like to install a few security cameras, a basic surveillance system to ensure your safety. Do you think they'll find me here? People who have abused power for years don't give up without a fight. It pays to be prepared. Evelyn slowly nodded. Do what you think is necessary. And Isaiah? Thank you. Not just for today, but for everything. For seeing what happened and not looking the other way. Mom, looking the other way was never an option. After making sure Evelyn was safely inside, Isaiah spent the afternoon installing wireless security cameras around his property, the front door, the back entrance, and the driveway. Professional-grade equipment that would send alerts to his phone if any unusual activity occurred. As the afternoon sun stretched into the late afternoon hours, still providing clear and bright light, Isaiah's phone rang. The caller was civil rights attorney Sarah Chen. Isaiah, we have a problem. The prosecution has filed additional charges against Ms. Harper. They added resisting arrest, assaulting an officer, and terrorist threats. Isaiah's jaw tightened. It's all fabricated. The video shows she was completely compliant, I know. But they're escalating the situation, trying to scare her into accepting a plea deal. The new charges could carry prison time. They want to intimidate her. He's not scared, Isaiah said firmly, but we need to move faster. How quickly can we get these charges dropped? With the FBI investigation, I can petition to have the case dismissed on grounds of probable cause and civil rights violations. Judge Harriet Morrison has been assigned to this case. She's fair-minded and won't tolerate police misconduct. But this could take weeks, maybe months. Until the system works, Ms. Harper shouldn't have to live under the threat of imprisonment for crimes she didn't commit. I agree. That's why I'm filing a motion to dismiss the case immediately on the grounds of prosecutorial misconduct and civil rights violations. It's an aggressive move, but the video evidence supports it. Isaiah ended the call and immediately checked the security camera footage on his phone. Evelyn's house looked quiet, the evening sun casting long shadows but still provided a clear view. However, his instincts told him this silence would not last. That night, or rather the next morning at dawn, just as the sun was beginning to paint the sky, Isaiah's security system alerted him to movement at Evelyn's house. He arrived within 4 minutes. As the sun rose on the horizon with bright morning light, 2 police cars were parked in Evelyn's driveway. The officers were on her porch, knocking on her door. Isaiah parked on the street and approached with controlled calm, his phone recording in the bright morning sun. "Can I help you, officers?" Officer Denton turned, and upon recognizing Isaiah, the aggressive look on his face gave way to a cautious expression. "This is none of your business. I am Mrs. Harper's witness and friend. Anything that concerns her concerns me. We have a search warrant to arrest her on additional charges, at dawn, for a 70-year-old woman who poses no flight risk." Isaiah kept his voice steady and recorded everything. "This is harassment, Officer Denton, and the camera is recording." Evelyn opened the door fully dressed despite the early hour, her chin lifted in silent dignity. "I'm here, officers. No need for drama." "Ma'am, you're under arrest." "I know why I'm being arrested." Evelyn cut him off. "False charges fabricated to intimidate me. Let's get this over with." She held out her hands to be cuffed, but Isaiah stepped forward. "Officers, I'm calling her attorney right now. Any questioning must wait until the lawyer arrives." Denton's face flushed. "You're interfering. I'm exercising Miss Harper's constitutional rights, and I'm documenting your actions in case this becomes yet another federal civil rights violation." In the bright morning light, with phones recording, neighbors coming out to watch, and the dawn sun making everything visible and documentable, a long stalemate ensued. Finally, Denton backed down. "Fine, we'll take her into custody, record it, and she can stay here until her lawyer arrives." "But this isn't over." "No," Isaiah quietly agreed. "It's not over. But you won't like the ending." While taking Evelyn away in the early morning hours, Isaiah had already begun calling Sarah Chen, Agent Frost, and Marcus Reynolds. The system was escalating, trying to crush Evelyn with fear and fabricated charges. But they had made a crucial mistake. They had assumed she was alone. They had assumed no one would fight back. They had forgotten that sometimes the right witness, at the right time, with the necessary training, resources, and determination, could turn corporate misconduct into federal liability. The sun continued to rise over Harbor Springs, illuminating a city where justice had been denied for years but was finally beginning to emerge. 3 months after Evelyn Harper's arrest at Harbor Federal Bank, the federal courthouse in the regional capital was bathed in late January sunlight, its neoclassical architecture casting long morning shadows on the snow-covered steps. The building reflected the weight of federal authority with its marble columns, bronze doors, and the carved inscription above the entrance, "Equal justice under the law." In courtroom number 7, this phrase would finally be put to the test. The case was Ray Denton, Harbor Federal Bank, and others v. United States. 6 weeks earlier, when the indictments were announced, they were federal civil rights charges that shocked the legal community. Among the others were Officer Kruger, Police Chief Robert Warren, Bank Manager Grant Holland, and 3 members of Harbor Federal's regional leadership who implemented the discriminatory partnership agreement. The courtroom was packed beyond capacity, and additional rooms had been set up to accommodate the hundreds of people who had come to watch justice be served. Evelyn sat in the front row behind the prosecution table, with Isaiah beside her. Both were dressed formally, emphasizing the importance of the moment. Behind them sat 8 elderly victims who, with similar experiences, formed the pattern of abuse. At the prosecution table sat Sarah Chen, FBI Special Agent Daniel Frost, and Assistant U.S. Attorney Victoria Martinez. They had spent 3 months preparing what Martinez called the most comprehensive civil rights conspiracy case seen in this region in 20 years. At multiple defense tables sat Denton, Kruger, Warren, Holland, and the bank executives. Each had expensive legal teams that had tried every legal avenue to have the charges dismissed, evidence suppressed, or the trial moved elsewhere. Federal Judge Harriet Morrison, 68, a black woman known for her serious demeanor in the courtroom, had rejected all requests. "All rise," announced the court clerk. The United States District Court, presided over by the Honorable Harriet Morrison, is now in session. Judge Morrison sat at the bench, her face expressionless. But Evelyn noticed the judge's eyes scanning the courtroom, lingering on the elderly victims in the gallery, and she saw something flicker there, perhaps recognition, or the memory of similar injustices she had witnessed over the decades. "Be seated," Judge Morrison said. "We are here for the hearing of the case between the United States and Denton et al. Are both parties ready?" "The United States is ready, Your Honor," said Martinez, rising with quiet confidence. Each defense team confirmed they were ready, but there was no convincing tone in their voices. The evidence against their clients had been thoroughly documented in pre-trial proceedings, and everyone in the courtroom knew this case had already been decided. The only question was how severe a punishment justice would deliver. Ms. Martinez, opening statement. The federal prosecutor stood and stepped forward to address the jury with his customary authority. The 12 jurors were a diverse group in terms of age, race, and background, carefully selected over a week-long process. Ladies and gentlemen, this case concerns a conspiracy to terrorize elderly citizens for conducting bank transactions because they were black. Harbor Federal Bank systematically targeted minority customers seeking to cash legitimate checks for 3 years. When these customers asserted their rights, the bank called the police. And Officer Ray Denton came not to investigate but to arrest, humiliate, and intimidate. Martinez projected evidence onto screens in the courtroom, organizational charts showing connections between the defendants, timelines documenting the course of the abuse, photos of elderly victims with bruised wrists from tight handcuffs. The evidence will show 17 documented incidents over 3 years. 17 elderly citizens were arrested for a non-existent fraud charge. 17 people were handcuffed, jailed, and terrorized. Not because they committed a crime, but because they dared to conduct ordinary banking transactions despite being black or Hispanic. He clicked on the video footage, Isaiah's recording from that October morning, showing Evelyn's arrest in full detail. The courtroom fell silent as it watched the elderly woman being handcuffed, denied her medication, and publicly humiliated for trying to cash a legitimate check. Several jurors reacted visibly, some taking notes more intensely, while others wore expressions of disgust. On October 12, Evelyn Harper, a 70-year-old widow, went to Harbor Federal Bank to cash her late husband's retirement check. She had been cashing the same check at the same bank every month for 12 years. Within minutes of arriving, she was treated like a criminal. Bank manager Grant Holland called the police without investigating. Officer Denton arrived and immediately arrested her, without any reasonable cause. When she tried to retrieve her heart medication, Officer Kruger kicked it to the ground. Martinez's voice hardened. But Mrs. Harper wasn't alone that day. A witness recorded everything, and that witness, a retired Navy SEAL named Isaiah Cole, refused to ignore the violation of an elderly woman's civil rights. His documentation triggered a federal investigation that uncovered a conspiracy by bank officials and law enforcement to systematically abuse their authority to exclude and intimidate minority customers. He addressed the jury directly. The law is clear. Depriving civil rights under the guise of the law is a federal crime. A conspiracy to deprive multiple citizens of their rights is a federal crime. And when that conspiracy targets the elderly and vulnerable, when it uses institutional power to terrorize those who should be protected, it strikes at the heart of everything our justice system represents. In their opening statements, the defense attempted to portray each defendant's actions as legitimate. Denton as an officer following bank fraud reports, Holland as an auditor implementing fraud prevention protocols, and Chief Warren as a leader enforcing public safety partnerships. However, these arguments fell flat in the face of the mountain of evidence already visible in the pretrial documents. Judge Morrison called the first witness. The United States may call its first witness. The United States calls Evelyn Harper. Evelyn walked to the witness stand with the same quiet dignity she had displayed when she entered Harbor Federal Bank that October morning. The January sun streaming through the high windows of the courtroom illuminated her face, revealing the strength of someone who had endured various humiliations for 70 years but had finally found a platform to demand accountability. After taking the oath, she sat down in the witness chair, calmly folding her hands in her lap. Martinez began gently. "Ms. Harper, please tell the jury about your relationship with Harbor Federal Bank prior to October 12th. I had an account at that bank for 42 years, said Evelyn, her voice clear and calm. "Since my husband Thomas and I opened our first joint account when we were newlyweds. I continued to bank there after he passed away 12 years ago. I cashed his pension check every month. Same bank, same routine, no problems. So what changed on October 12th? Evelyn recounted that morning in detail. How Lydia Barnes went from routine transactions to theatrical suspicion, Grant Holland's demonstrative concern and immediate call to the police, Denton arriving without conducting an investigation. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't look at the check or my ID. He didn't verify anything. He grabbed me, put me in handcuffs, and started arresting me on fraud charges." Her voice remained steady, but her hands tensed slightly. When I asked why, he said people like me don't belong in real banks. Martinez played the video containing unedited footage of the entire incident. The jury watched Evelyn being handcuffed and behaving submissively, Denton's excessive use of force, Kruger kicking her medication on the ground, the deliberate cruelty of the entire arrest. When the video ended, several jurors were visibly upset. An elderly white woman wiped away tears. "Ms. Harper, had you ever been arrested before that day?" "Never, not in 70 years. Did you resist the arrest in any way?" "No, I complied completely. I'm 70 years old, and I have arthritis. What was I supposed to do, fight 2 police officers?" The courtroom rippled with quiet acceptance. Martinez showed photos of Evelyn's bruised wrists. "These injuries, how did they happen?" "The handcuffs. Officer Denton fastened them so tightly that they cut off my circulation. When I said it hurt, he said it wasn't a problem. I still have nerve damage in my right hand." "What about your heart medication?" "When my bag fell, my pill bottles spilled out. I asked for them because I have a heart condition that requires daily medication. Officer Kruger kicked them on the ground and told me I should have thought about that before trying to commit fraud." The defense's cross-examination attempted to imply that Evelyn was uncooperative or threatening, but each question was contradicted by video evidence showing her perfect cooperation and medical records documenting her heart condition, which made the refusal of medication particularly cruel. Isaiah then testified, highlighting the reliability of military service and the clarity of someone trained in tactical observation. "Commander Cole, you were present during Ms. Harper's arrest. Please describe what you observed." Isaiah recounted every detail to the jury with SEAL precision: the performative nature of the bank's suspicions, the police's immediate intervention without investigation, the excessive force used against an obedient elderly woman, the deliberate cruelty in withholding her medication. In my military training, we learned to assess threats and respond proportionately. What I saw was two armed officers using excessive force against a 70-year-old woman who posed no threat. This was not law enforcement, it was abuse of authority. He explained that he documented the incident, paid Evelyn's bail, and discovered a pattern of similar cases. When I learned this was not an isolated incident but part of a systematic pattern targeting elderly minorities, I knew I had to act. I had spent 10 years fighting America's enemies overseas. I couldn't stand by while American citizens were terrorized in their own country. The prosecution called 8 other victims, establishing a devastating pattern. Every elderly person, black, Hispanic, frail, dignified, told nearly the same story. Harassment, arrest, humiliation, and then, after weeks of fear and legal expenses, the charges were dropped. 82-year-old Gloria Chen recounted being arrested for trying to cash her Social Security check. I'd been banking there for 30 years. Suddenly they treated me like a criminal. Officer Denton handcuffed me so hard he dislocated my shoulder. 75-year-old Robert Washington was arrested for depositing his tax refund. They held me in jail for 8 hours. I'm diabetic and couldn't get my insulin dose. I could have died. Each statement added weight to an undeniable pattern that this was not about crime prevention, it was systematic discrimination enforced by police power. Agent Frost presented the FBI's findings, 17 documented incidents showing that a public-private partnership agreement that facilitated discrimination, financial records showing Harbor Federal received insurance payments for prevented fraud, and that these payments were added to managers' bonus calculations. This conspiracy was profitable, Frost stated plainly. Every wrongful arrest produced paperwork justifying fraud prevention bonuses for bank managers. The more minority customers they targeted, the more money they made. A financial analyst testified about the bonus structure and showed that Grant Holland received an additional $47,000 for fraud prevention. This amount was calculated based on the number of reported suspicious activity reports regardless of whether fraud actually existed. So he received financial incentives to target customers regardless of legitimacy? Martinez asked. Yes. More reports meant more bonus money. The courtroom erupted in anger at the money-driven nature of the scheme. Police Chief Warren's testimony was played, a video in which he admitted that the partnership agreement with Harbor Federal was designed to prevent certain elements from accessing financial services they cannot afford and prevent certain elements from using financial services they couldn't afford. His own words found him guilty. The jury watched as he explained that targeting elderly minorities was to prevent future problems and protect the bank's reputation. Expert witnesses on civil rights law stated that this pattern of behavior constituted a systematic violation of constitutional rights. Experts on the use of force confirmed that Denton's treatment of Evelyn violated the entire protocol for dealing with non-threatening individuals. The defense called character witnesses, such as officers praising Denton's dedication and bank employees defending Holland's professionalism. However, all witnesses collapsed when confronted with video evidence, patterns of behavior, and the defendant's own words admitting their discriminatory intent. Denton took the witness stand himself, and this proved disastrous for his defense. Under Martinez's pointed questioning, confronted with video evidence, behavioral patterns, and the defendant's own words admitting their discriminatory intent, Denton's defense collapsed. Denton took the witness stand himself, and this proved disastrous for his defense. Video evidence, documentation of this pattern of behavior, and the defendant's own words admitting their discriminatory intent. Denton himself took the stand, and this proved disastrous for his defense. Under Martinez's pointed questioning, he admitted that he responded to 17 calls from Harbor Federal over 3 years, arrested elderly customers without investigating the legitimacy of their checks, and never verified whether fraud actually existed before making the arrests. Officer Denton, in the 17 incidents, did you ever verify whether fraud actually existed before arresting anyone? The bank told us it was fraud. That was enough. So without investigating, you arrested elderly citizens based solely on a bank employee's suspicion? That's our partnership agreement. They report the fraud, we intervene. Even though in all 17 cases the charges were eventually dropped because there was no fraud? That's not my responsibility. I just make arrests. You just make arrests of citizens in their 70s and 80s without reasonable cause. Under the guise of fraud prevention based on racial profiling, I object to that characterization, Denton retorted. I was following department policy. Department policy targeting minorities? The defense objected, but the damage was already done. Denton had admitted to making systematic arrests without investigation, and the anger he showed during questioning revealed the contempt underlying his actions. The trial ended on a Friday afternoon in late January, a day when bright winter sunlight streamed through the high windows and filled the courtroom. The jury deliberated for 6 hours over 2 days. When they returned at 10 a.m. on Monday morning, the courtroom was silent except for the rustle of people settling into their seats. Evelyn sat between Isaiah and Sarah Chen, her hands in her lap, calm despite the magnitude of what was about to happen. The jury forewoman, a 54-year-old Hispanic woman who had worked as a social worker for 30 years, stood and read the verdict. In the case of the United States versus Ray Denton, we find the defendant guilty of conspiring to violate civil rights under the pretext of law. Evelyn closed her eyes for a moment. Guilty of conspiracy to violate civil rights. Guilty of excessive use of force. Guilty of threatening witnesses. Guilty on all 14 counts. The president continued reading the verdict for each defendant. Officer Kruger, guilty of conspiracy, excessive use of force, and deprivation of medical care. Police Chief Warren, guilty on all counts. Conspiracy, abuse of authority, creating policies that facilitated civil rights violations. Grant Holland, guilty on all counts. Conspiracy, fraud, creating systems designed to discriminate. Harbor Federal Bank executives, guilty of conspiracy charges, guilty of systematic civil rights violations. The courtroom was shaken by tears, silent nods, and murmurs of justice finally being served. A measured celebration. Evelyn sat motionless, letting the moment wash over her, letting 70 years of various indignities be resolved by these simple words: guilty, guilty, guilty. Judge Morrison banged his gavel to restore order. Sentencing will be handed down 8 weeks from today. The defendants will remain in federal custody until sentencing. As the marshals led the handcuffed defendants away, Denton's face showed the shock of someone who truly believed his badge would protect him. Holland looked physically ill. Chief Warren had visibly aged during the trial. Outside the courthouse, the media surrounded Evelyn, Isaiah, Sarah Chen, and Agent Frost. Late morning sun shone brightly, making everything look clear and sharp. "Ms. Harper, what are your thoughts on the verdicts?" a reporter asked. Evelyn touched the bruise on her wrist, which had finally faded, leaving only a slight discoloration. "I was right, but I also recognize that this victory came thanks to those who helped me, a witness who refused to look away, attorneys who believed me, an FBI agent who conducted a thorough investigation. So many people endure similar abuse silently because they don't have these resources. What message would you like to send to other elderly citizens who experience discrimination? Document everything, report it using all available channels, connect with others who have experienced similar treatment, and know that truth has power, even if systems try to suppress it. The evidence will eventually come to light." Isaiah added his perspective. "What happened to Harper was not an isolated incident. It was systematic. The guilty verdicts proved that the decisions were the result of a conspiracy to violate civil rights, and that badges and institutional power do not grant immunity from responsibility." Agent Frost emphasized the broader implications. This case exposed a conspiracy involving multiple agencies. The convictions send a clear message. Systematic civil rights violations will be prosecuted at the federal level, and all involved, from the officers who enabled the abuse to the managers and supervisors, will face consequences. That evening, as the winter sun set over Harbor Springs, Isaiah dropped Evelyn off at her home. The city looked different now. Not because anything had physically changed, but because justice had been served, systematic abuse had been exposed, and accountability had been enforced. "Are you tired?" Isaiah asked. "I'm relieved," Evelyn replied. "And grateful. To you, to Agent Frost, to everyone who helped turn my humiliation into accountability. You did the hard part, refusing to be silent, maintaining your dignity despite everything they did to you, testifying despite the threats. That took more courage than anything I did." Evelyn watched as he drove past the familiar streets of Harbor Springs. "What will you do now? Will you continue on your path as planned?" Isaiah thought about the key Evelyn had given him to the cabin at Morrison Lake, a peaceful place earned through justice served. He thought about the other battles still to be fought, the other wrongs still to be righted. "I'll stay a little longer. I'll make sure the punishment is carried out properly. I'll help the other victims navigate the compensation process. Then, we'll see. The cottage will always be there when you need it," Evelyn said quietly. A place to rest between battles. When Isaiah arrived at Evelyn's house, still protected by the security cameras she had installed, still bearing traces of the dawn arrest attempt, the winter sun cast long shadows across the front yard. 3 months earlier, he had been arrested at a bank for trying to cash a legitimate check because he was old and black. Today, everyone who mistreated him was found guilty of federal crimes. Officer Ray Denton was sentenced to prison for systematic civil rights violations. Grant Holland and the bank executives faced financial ruin and possible jail time. Police Chief Warren was forced to answer for creating policies that facilitated discrimination. And Evelyn Harper, 70 years old, a widow, a survivor of 70 years of various indignities, finally saw justice served, not only for herself but also for 17 other victims who had suffered similar abuse. The fight was not over. Sentences were still pending. Lawsuits would continue. Systematic reforms would need to be implemented and monitored. But tonight, Evelyn could sleep soundly, knowing that guilty verdicts had been handed down, the conspiracy exposed, and that an elderly woman's refusal to surrender her dignity had set in motion a process of accountability that would protect countless others. Delayed but undeniable justice had finally been served. 8 weeks after the guilty verdicts, the same federal courtroom filled once more for sentencing. The March morning sun streamed through the high windows with a clear, bright light symbolizing the transition from winter to spring, illuminating the space where accountability would finally be measured in prison time. Evelyn sat in the front row, Isaiah beside her, both dressed formally for the gravity of the moment. Behind them, the other 8 victims implicated in the conspiracy, community members following the case, and journalists documenting the outcome of this landmark civil rights case filled the room. At the defense table, Denton, Kruger, Warren, Holland, and 3 bank executives sat wearing federal detention jumpsuits. The orange fabric symbolized their transformation from powerful figures to convicted criminals. Denton looked diminished, his former arrogance replaced by the empty realization that his badge would not protect him. Holland looked older, new lines on his face showing the weight of his sentence. Chief Warren trembled slightly. The former figure of authority was now on trial himself. Judge Morrison entered the courtroom at 10 a.m. with a serious expression. He had spent the last 8 weeks reviewing pre-sentence reports, victim impact statements, and extensive documentation of the damage caused by the conspiracy. This court has presided over many cases involving abuse of authority, Judge Morrison began, his voice carrying the weight of decades of judicial experience, but very few have exhibited such a systematic, deliberate, and sustained violation of civil rights coordinated across multiple agencies. The screens in the courtroom displayed statistics illustrating the years-long conspiracy in numbers. Over 3 years, this conspiracy led to the arrest of elderly citizens 17 times on non-existent fraud charges. 17 people were handcuffed, jailed, publicly humiliated, and had their basic human dignity violated. And there were countless others who never reported it because they believed the system was rigged against them. Judge Morrison looked at each defendant. What you did more than harm individuals. You corrupted institutions that are supposed to serve and protect citizens. You used banking services and law enforcement as weapons to terrorize vulnerable people. You created a system where being elderly and black at the bank became a reason for arrest. He started with Denton. Ray Denton, stand up. Denton slowly stood up, his hands cuffed in front of him. You were the enforcement arm of this conspiracy. For 3 years, you arrested 77 elderly citizens without reasonable cause or investigation, solely on the basis of racial profiling under the guise of preventing fraud. You used excessive force against compliant victims. You deprived them of medical care. You treated people with callous indifference because you thought your badge made you untouchable. Judge Morrison's voice hardened. For 14 counts of civil rights violations under the guise of the law, I sentence you to 12 years in federal prison. For conspiracy, 5 consecutive years. For excessive force, 3 consecutive years. Total sentence, 20 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole. The number hit like a hammer. Denton, 49 years old, would be 69 when released. His law enforcement career ruined, his most productive years behind him, his reputation permanently tarnished as a civil rights violator. Additionally, you will forfeit all your pension rights. You will be permanently barred from law enforcement, security, or government positions. Upon release, you will be subject to 5 years of supervised release, with mandatory community service at organizations serving senior citizens. Denton's face showed no emotion, but his hands trembled as the marshals led him back to his seat. Judge Morrison turned to Kruger. Officer Kruger, rise. The young officer stood, looking physically ill. You participated in this conspiracy, used excessive force, and specifically refused to provide medical care to vulnerable citizens. 8 years federal prison for conspiracy. 4 consecutive years for civil rights violations. For the crime of denying medical care, 2 consecutive years. Total sentence 14 years. He turned to Chief Warren. As police chief, not only did you fail to stop this conspiracy, you created the policies that made it possible. You signed the partnership agreement that facilitated systematic discrimination. You dismissed complaints and protected officers who violated civil rights. 15 years in federal prison for conspiracy. 5 consecutive years for abuse of office. 3 consecutive years for creating policies designed to deprive citizens of their civil rights. Total sentence 23 years. At 62 years old, Warren would likely die in prison. Judge Morrison directed his next remarks to Holland. Grant Holland, you designed the bank's targeting system. You created financial incentives that rewarded discrimination. You personally reported 17 elderly citizens to the police, whose only crime was conducting legitimate banking transactions because they were members of a minority. 10 years for conspiracy, 5 consecutive years for bonus scheme fraud, 3 consecutive years for systematic civil rights violations. Total sentence 18 years. Finally, he turned to the 3 bank executives. Each received sentences ranging from 8 to 12 years for their roles in creating the conspiracy and profiting from it. Judge Morrison addressed the courtroom. To the victims, these sentences cannot compensate for the harm you suffered. They cannot restore the honor stolen, the fear endured, the trust violated. However, I hope these sentences will serve a purpose and send a clear message that civil rights violations, especially those targeting our most vulnerable citizens, will be prosecuted with the full force of federal law. He looked directly at Evelyn. Miss Harper, while many remained silent, you showed the courage to resist. You refused to accept a plea bargain that would have covered up this conspiracy. You were willing to testify despite threats. You exposed years of systematic abuse because that abuse depended on victims believing justice was impossible. You proved that belief wrong. As the marshals led the convicted conspirators out of the courtroom for the last time, the courtroom filled with tears and embraces. Evelyn felt Isaiah beside her, sensing that the weight of the 8-week wait had transformed into a kind of peace. Outside the courthouse, media personalities surrounded them. It was a bright spring morning in March. Perfect weather for new beginnings. Miss Harper, the total sentences are 95 years. Does that sound like justice to you? Asked a reporter. Evelyn touched the spot on her wrist where the bruises had long since faded. Justice isn't just about prison sentences. It's about accountability, systemic change, taking steps to ensure this never happens to anyone again. Sentences matter, but reforms matter more. Sarah Chen summarized these reforms. Harbor Federal Bank was placed under federal consent decree. The discriminatory partnership agreement was terminated. The city implemented civilian oversight of police complaints. And most importantly, we enacted the Protecting the Banking Rights of Senior Citizens Act. This federal law defines exposing senior citizens to discriminatory banking practices as a specific crime. The FBI will continue to oversee the Harbor Springs Police Department for at least 5 years. Every complaint will be investigated independently. Every arrest will require documented probable cause. The days of targeting vulnerable citizens with impunity are over. A reporter turned to Isaiah. Commander Cole, you witnessed Miss Harper's arrest and decided to intervene. Why did you stay when you could have walked away? Isaiah looked at Evelyn, standing tall and dignified under the spring sun. I spent 10 years fighting enemies overseas with the Navy SEALs. When I saw an elderly woman being arrested for banking because she was black, I realized that some of America's enemies wear badges and use institutional power to terrorize citizens. Walking away was not an option. Ms. Harper deserved an ally, and I was in a position to be that ally. 3 months after the verdict, on a bright June morning when the summer sun bathed everything in gold, the opening ceremony of the Evelyn Harper Community Credit Union drew hundreds of people to what had once been the main branch of Harbor Federal Bank. The building had been completely transformed. Harbor Federal's imposing barriers and bulletproof glass were gone. Instead, warm wood and comfortable chairs created a welcoming environment. The teller counters were open and accessible, designed for conversation. Large windows filled the interior with natural light, making everything visible and transparent. Outside, a crowd had gathered on the sidewalk: senior citizens, community leaders, local residents, and the 8 victims who had helped bring the conspiracy charges to fruition. The morning sun glinted off the new bronze plaque beside the entrance. Evelyn Harper Community Credit Union, everyone's honor matters. Patricia Wilson, the newly elected mayor following the scandal that had swept away the previous administration, stood on the podium under the bright sunlight. Today symbolizes more than the opening of a financial institution, she said, her voice clear. It represents the transformation of systematic abuse into systematic justice, exclusion into inclusion, fear into empowerment. She detailed the changes implemented in recent months. A complete overhaul of the police force under federal oversight, a civilian review board with subpoena power and full access to all records, mandatory bias training for all officers, zero tolerance for civil rights violations, community policing initiatives requiring officers to work in the neighborhoods they serve. Councilmember Sarah Rodriguez, and most importantly, the Protecting the Banking Rights of Senior Citizens Act ensures that what happened here cannot be dismissed as an isolated incident of abuse. It is now a federal law with enforcement mechanisms and penalties that make protecting our most vulnerable citizens a national priority, she added. Isaiah stood behind the crowd, watching but trying not to draw attention to himself. He had assisted throughout the investigation, ensured Evelyn's safety during the trial, and coordinated with other victims. But this moment belonged not to him, but to the community. Evelyn was invited to cut the ceremonial ribbon. She stood at the entrance in a deep purple dress, her silver hair reflecting the sunlight, looking stronger than she had in months. The fear that had clouded her eyes since the arrest, the fear that had clouded her eyes had vanished, replaced by a quiet satisfaction that justice had been served. "Would you like to say a few words?" asked Mayor Wilson. Evelyn stepped up to the microphone and looked out at the assembled faces, her friends, neighbors, other victims, community members who had supported her fight. 6 months ago, I walked into a bank to cash a check and was arrested because I am black. I was handcuffed, denied my medication, thrown into a jail cell, and subjected to arbitrary cruelty by people who thought their power made them untouchable. Her voice grew stronger, but they forgot one important thing. They forgot the power of truth. They forgot that documents constitute evidence. They forgot that sometimes the right witness appears at the right time. She looked at Isaiah and refuses to look away. This credit union exists because we refused to stay silent, because we documented the abuse, because we connected with other victims and proved it was systematic, because we fought against fear and intimidation to demand accountability. Evelyn pointed to the renovated building behind her. This place once represented exclusion and discrimination. Now it represents what financial services should be: accessible, dignified, designed to serve everyone equally. She raised the ceremonial scissors. Everyone who walks through this door will be treated with respect. Every transaction will be conducted with dignity. Every senior citizen will know they belong here. The ribbon was cut with a satisfying snip. Applause, cheers, and happy tears erupted. People began filing inside for the reception. The interior was beautiful: natural light, comfortable furniture, staff specially selected for their commitment to serving diverse communities. The credit union offered services that Harbor Federal had denied many people: small loans, financial literacy classes, accessible banking for people with limited mobility. Evelyn greeted visitors, accepted congratulations, and watched as the elderly citizens explored the space, visibly relieved to be welcome here. 82-year-old Gloria Chen opened the credit union's first account, a symbolic moment captured by media cameras. "No intimidation," Ms. Chen said happily. "No suspicious looks, just respect and service. This is how banking should be." As the afternoon progressed, the bright summer sun continuing to stream in through the large windows, Isaiah found Evelyn near the community room where financial literacy classes would be held. "You're leaving," Evelyn said. "It wasn't a question." Isaiah nodded. "The fight here has been won. Penalties were imposed, reforms implemented. This credit union opened. You don't need protection anymore. But you still carry the key I gave you. The key to the cabin at Morrison Lake. Yes. Knowing I have a place to return to if I need it, it comforts me." Evelyn smiled. "Isaiah Cole, you helped an old woman you didn't even know for months find justice against a corrupt system. You posted my bail, documented the evidence, coordinated the investigations, provided security. You made accountability possible. You made her take responsibility," Isaiah corrected. "By refusing to settle, by testifying despite threats, by standing firm while you backed down. I just supported you. Very important support." Evelyn touched his arm gently. "Where will you go?" "Wherever I'm needed. There are other Evelyn Harpers out there, vulnerable to abuse with no one to help them. I can't save everyone, but I can help where I am." "The cottage will be there," Evelyn said. "When you need to rest between battles, when you need to remember that justice is possible." They stood in comfortable silence, watching through the windows as community members discovered the new credit union, elderly citizens conducting their banking with dignity, the place that had represented systematic exploitation, transforming into systematic justice. That evening, as the summer sun painted the sky with amber and gold tones, Isaiah loaded the few possessions he had accumulated over 6 months in Harbor Springs into his pickup truck. The cabin key hanging on his keychain was not just a piece of metal, a place to return to, people who appreciated what he had done, a promise that even if he moved on, his connection to the community would remain. He passed Evelyn's house one last time. Evelyn sat on her porch, a book in her hand, looking more peaceful than when they first met. The security cameras she had installed still watched over her property, but the fear that had caused them to be installed was gone. Evelyn saw his truck and waved. Isaiah waved back, a simple gesture of farewell between people who had fought and won together. Isaiah no longer felt the fear that had caused the four, one longer represented the fear that had prompted their installation. Evelyn saw his truck and waved. Isaiah waved back, a simple farewell gesture between people who had fought and won together. Isaiah left Harbor Springs as the sun set, and headed for the highways that would take him to where luck and purpose intersected. In his rearview mirror, the city receded. The place where he had witnessed injustice, refused to look away, and helped ensure accountability that would protect countless people. Officer Ray Denton was serving the first year of his 20-year sentence and learning that badges did not grant immunity from justice. Grant Holland was serving the first year of his 18-year sentence and discovering the federal consequences of profiting from discrimination. Chief Warren and the other conspirators were beginning decades behind bars, their corruption exposed and punished. And Evelyn Harper, 70 years old, widowed, the survivor, lived freely in a city she had transformed with her refusal to surrender her dignity, her courage to fight a system designed to make her feel powerless, and her commitment to justice over easy compromise. The cabin by Morrison Lake waited peacefully and quietly for the times when Isaiah needed to rest between battles. The keychain reminded him that some struggles forged lasting bonds, some victories built communities, and sometimes helping one person could trigger changes that protected thousands. The road stretched into the approaching twilight, but Isaiah continued driving, illuminating the way ahead with his headlights. There would be other injustices to witness, other victims needing allies, other battles where SEAL training and the resolve to hold power accountable could make a difference. But tonight, he could rest knowing Evelyn Harper's struggle had ended in complete victory. The guilty had been convicted, punishments administered, reforms implemented, and a community transformed from a place where elderly citizens were terrorized into one where everyone's dignity mattered. Hard-won and fully enforced justice had prevailed, and sometimes that was enough.